Hello and welcome to another edition of LaborVision. Today I am your host, James Dennis, and I want everybody, when you see this podcast, to hit that follow button, to hit that subscribe button, to give us a rating, however you want to rate it, and give us a good review. Because this is the podcast where you tell your story. And today's podcast is going to be a good one. It's going to be more of an educational piece. Today we have a very, very special guest. His name is Fred Miller. He is the Macomb County Clerk. And I remember seeing some more things behind his names about registered deeds. We're gonna get into it. Fred, how you doing today?
Mr. James Dennis, it is great to be with you on the podcast. Thank you for having me.
Cool. Tell us about yourself, my brother.
So I've had the good fortune to be in this position as Macomb County Clerk for about 8 months right now.
Wow.
I won a special election in 2018. And so we're filling the rest of this term. Macomb County, of course, is the third largest county in Michigan.
Yep.
Stretched from 8 Mile up to 36 Mile, from DeQuinder over to the lake. And Warren is our biggest city. We're here in Mount Clemens as we speak, which is the county seat. And the county clerk, I like to say, is kind of the mechanic of county government. All the systems running in county government, and the county clerk and the register of deeds kind of maintain those systems. There's 4 different divisions that we operate. Number one is the court section. So the 16th Circuit Court, we run the jury pool for them. We receive all the lawsuits, the motions, and all that stuff for all the parties who are involved. We have the Register of Deeds. So anytime that you buy or sell a piece of property, a home or a business, that deed has to be recorded here in our office to make it an official transaction.
Wow.
Mortgages are recorded here. And if you're looking to make sure that your house gets transmitted to your next of kin when you pass on,
right?
You file a quick claim deed and you can transfer it here.
You handle that
at the deeds office. Yep. And then we do vital records, so which are your birth records, death records, marriage licenses, pistol licenses, notary public, all that kind of stuff. So all the milestone moments of your life, you come into contact with the clerk's office, whether you know it or not. And then finally, I think what we're here to talk about today, we administer elections in Macomb County. So the local clerk, we work in conjunction with the local clerks in the cities and townships who administer the day of election. They're the ones that actually have the polling booths and all that. But we work with them to order the ballots, to canvass the elections, to make sure the results are available for people, and then we transmit them to Lansing, the Secretary of State. So,
wow, that's a lot. So you know what, Fred? Before we go into what we are here for today, let's go into a little bit of your history, because I was reading about you. You used to be a state rep.
That's right.
You've accomplished some good things. Can you go into some of the things that you've accomplished? I think something about Michigan First or Buy Michigan. Can we talk about that just a tad bit, please?
Sure. Well, I come from a labor background. My folks were union teachers. And I remember one of my earliest memories is we'd have a week of breakfast for dinner. We were having pancakes, and us kids thought it was great. And then my folks were kind of explaining it to us that my dad was on strike with the teachers, and so we were having pancakes for dinner for about a week. But good labor value, so we raised that way. And I got into politics early on. I was inspired by Congressman David Bonnier, now retired.
I remember David Bonnier.
Yep, he was the whip for a while.
Yep,
and staunch supporter of labor, and so learned from him kind of the intersection of politics and labor, and got to make many strong relationships in the labor community. And then, after working for Congressman Bonnier for a while, I thought, this is something that I can do too. So I ran for state rep, served in the House for 6 years, from 2005 to 2010. I think of that time, it was a tough time. That was when we were experiencing the economic fallout, and it was a tough time for the state, tough time for families, working people everywhere. And we, one thing that I'm proudest of, we were able to take ideas that people had given us, worked a lot with the building trades, with other unions to craft a package of bills called Hire Michigan First.
Okay.
So back then, the state of Michigan was a $45 billion a year enterprise. So they, in terms of contracts, money that they're spending. And so the purpose of our legislation, which was to say, if you're spending taxpayer dollars, let's make sure that it's Michigan taxpayers who are benefiting.
Right.
And that's in the form of contracts, making sure that that companies that contract with the state are hiring Michigan workers, and things like that. And our economic incentives that they give out, tax breaks and whatnot, let's make sure that we're asking something in return to invest in people. So We were able to pass it out of the House. We were never able to get it to Governor Granholm's desk, although she was supportive. We had broad support from the labor community. But I was just happy to see, just the other day, Governor Whitmer signed an executive order here in Macomb County implementing some of these principles into her economic agenda and making sure that we're putting, when the state has leverage, that we're benefiting working people. So I love to see that one idea that came up 15 years ago is still alive and being implemented now by our great Governor Whitmer. So that was exciting to see.
You know what? It's always good to have people like you that's got a rich history. You said, your parents, labor folks, and you kind of just took those values, state rep. Now you're a Macomb clerk. So this is a beautiful thing. So this isn't coming from somebody that don't know or hasn't been in the battle or don't have battle scars. So let me say this first and foremost, because you have came highly recommended. Thank you for all the work that you have done. Let's say that first and foremost. Give you applause. Yes, give you applause. Thank you. So let's get into what this show is going to be all about. And that is Prop 3. What is Prop 3?
So this came about from the constitutional amendment that we passed as a state in November 2018. And at that point, a lot of attention was rightfully put on the redistricting commission, the redistricting change, which is a high-profile change, very, very important change, which is still taking some time to implement. Mm-hmm. But what didn't get as much attention, and of course, marijuana was on the ballot. That got a lot of attention too.
Yeah, that got a whole lot of attention. In fact, you kind of smell that. It's in the air everywhere, right?
It's in the air everywhere. Yep, it's in the air. But Prop 3 was kind of like the one that, I don't want to say it came in under the radar, but it did. I don't think it didn't. It was overshadowed by these other important initiatives, right?
It was.
But when you unpack what it did, it represents the biggest change in our voting rights in Michigan in at least a generation. Going back to the reform era. So it's really exciting, all the changes. But we know that voting is a learned behavior.
Yes, it is.
People aren't just born as good voters or born as non-voters, but these are habits that people form over time.
Right.
And so the changes that are in Prop 3 people have to understand what they're all about, and it has to be explained, which is why podcasts and other platforms like yours and labor leaders and stewards and whatnot need to tell the story about Prop 3 and need to tell people what the tools that are at their disposal. So without getting too much into the weeds, there were a couple of really simple things and kind of no-brainer things that Prop 3 did. Basically. Number one guaranteed everybody's right to vote a secret ballot. Which is a bedrock principle, but important to put it in the Michigan Constitution.
Right.
It also made sure that we had ballots could get to our overseas military folk in a timely fashion, so it put that in the Michigan Constitution.
Okay, hold on one second. For our people that serve us in our armed forces, so prior to Prop 3, and I'm just getting understanding, how did they vote? Were they able to get a ballot? How did they vote?
Sure. They vote absentee mostly, but they have special provisions that were put in place by federal law. There's two big federal laws that govern this, because after, I don't know what exactly the timeline is, but it's called, the acronym is called UOCAVA, which is Overseas Voters Act.
Okay.
That's getting way into the weeds, but it basically was the Congress and the president saying we're going to put a high priority on making sure that our men and women overseas can vote as easily as possible. So it extended them the opportunity to get those absentee ballots. It made sure that the local clerks back here in America put a premium on that, got them their ballots as soon as possible, and it also even said that so much it's easy enough to make it easy enough that if there was a voter overseas that wanted to cast a ballot, literally, this is in the law, a service member can write a letter, return it to their clerk, and then the clerk has to include that as a vote.
Wow.
Because a high premium is placed on making sure that those folks have their voices heard. Now, there are a lot of other ways that they do it, and the military does have online voting for them, which are not available to us back home. But other ways to make sure that that's at a premium. But Prop 3 rightfully included that in the Michigan Constitution, so to kind of take the federal law and make sure that it was part of state law as well.
Cool. So that means that even if the president and the federal don't do what they're supposed to do, our overseas folks can still vote according to Prop 3, correct?
Absolutely, yep.
All right, that's cool. And what was the next point? I'm sorry, before I interrupted you.
No, this is a key point that it also, and it's going to make a big difference come next year, but an automatic voter registration. So every time that you go to the Secretary of State, most times people go there to get their license or to change their license.
Right.
So now you can go there to change your address, let's say. The clerk there at the Secretary of State will ask you, Mr. Dennis, do you want to register to vote? Or,
right.
Or if you're a young person getting your license for the first time, do you want to register to vote? Now you automatically they basically opt you in, and you have to tell them specifically that you want to opt out. So it's a subtle change, but it's really making it automatic so that we're getting people registered every intersection that they have with the Secretary of State's office.
Okay, so let me get this straight. So from what I can remember, and this was years ago. Actually, I got my driver's license at 16, so I had to go back and register to vote when I turned 18. But I knew my parents were really advocates of that.
It was a learned habit that you learned from them, right?
Exactly. So the way it was before Prop 3 was I would go into the Secretary of State office, 18, get a new license. They're supposed to ask me, hey, would you like to register to vote?
That's correct, yes.
Because, I don't know if everybody got asked, because I know they have a lot to do down at the Secretary State office. So they have a lot going on there. So I don't know if everybody actually got asked. But with Prop 3, they automatically get opted in. It's not an ask there. It's just like once it's done, it just automatically goes through.
It's making it automatic. It's an assumption that we're registering everybody. And you think about the Secretary of State's office touches so many people at so many different times for driver's license and license plates and all kinds of stuff.
Right.
And so why not, when just the important right to include people in the process, make it automatic? And so that's really what this did. Research has shown that in other states that have done this, implemented this change, it can make as much of a difference as 3% to 4% in the turnout, which doesn't seem like a whole lot, but we know in Michigan elections are close, especially these big important elections. They're real close. So 3-4% in turnout can change an awful lot of things.
I don't know. I think it's gonna be bigger than that, because you got a lot of people. Like I said, maybe what if the Secretary of State person did not ask and they didn't even put them in? At this point, all of those people are going to be put in to be able to vote. It's like not even thought of at this point. It's just like, hey, you're automatically going to be added. It's no telling how many people out there that are not registered voters.
That's true. And it's also about treating everybody in the state the same. Treat everybody fairly. So whether you're in Detroit, whether you're in Alpena, Mount Clemens, Marquette, it's the same interaction, the same opportunity to register to vote for everybody. And making it automatic, because everybody should have an opportunity to have their voice heard.
So when will this automatic thing kick in? Will it kick in, let's say the next time people go update their license, or they go do something? From this point forward, how does that automatically registration works?
So as I understand it, it's a change in progress. So the law has changed, which is really the hardest part about it. It's getting the mandate's out there. It's in the Michigan Constitution now, but now they have to change the systems. And I have absolute confidence in our great Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, who's working really hard. Because you think about the Secretary of State's office department, it's a huge bureaucracy of a lot of people and 200 plus offices all across the state. So there's computer systems, there's staff training, there's all kinds of stuff that has to be considered. And so it's my understanding that they're in the process of doing that. So it is not, as of this writing, as of this podcast, in place systematically right now. However, I have absolute confidence in our great Secretary of State that it's going to be coming post-haste and definitely in time for next year's main event, so to speak.
I tell you what, she is one person I definitely wouldn't mind interviewing, because I'm just wondering how the job is going, with the change, because she's brand new at this, and she's got a lot of staff there, so it's a lot being, But anyway, back to the Prop 3. So I think that's a plus, because we need to get our people to vote. What's the saying I say at the Union Hall all the time? Your cooperation equals your representation. So if we don't cooperate with the voting process, then we don't get represented.
That's right. Another quote that I like to say is from the late great comedian George Carlin, If you don't vote, you lose the right to complain, and that can go with union elections. That can go with municipal elections,
Yes,
if
yes.
you're not
I heard him say that.
If you're not participating in your union, if you're not participating in your community, you forfeit your right to complain, Not everybody sees it that way, but that's the truth.
That is true. That is very, 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 very true.
Now, one other thing before we get into the real meat of Prop 3, one other thing that I don't want to say that it's not meat because it's important. But it also guaranteed in the Michigan Constitution that we would do these after election audits, which were in part already being done. But again, it elevates it to the Michigan Constitution and saying to kind of help people have confidence in their elections that the true will of the people is coming through.
Okay.
There's so much suspicion with all of our institutions lately. And I'll just say it. I mean, our commander-in-chief is part of that, just, sowing these seeds of discontent, although it comes from, it was before him and it'll be after him too. But the more that I learn about elections in Michigan, the more confidence I have in the fairness and the integrity of our elections. But this is one more thing, put in the Michigan Constitution that says we're going to perform these random audits afterwards to make sure that the votes that were cast were actually the votes that were counted.
Great.
And so they'll go around randomly, pick different precincts from Ottawa County to Macomb to Wayne to Marquette, all over the place, to make sure that that we're auditing and that things are happening as they should. One more step in the process to make sure that we have fair elections. And so very, very important. So those are kind of, all four of those things are kind of systemic things which don't really affect you and me as voters. But here's
No. It actually does, because it brings up voters' confidence.
True.
Yes. I mean, everything that you're saying brings up voters' confidence. I'm like, how come we haven't been doing this before? But hey, I'm glad we got it.
Right. Well,
bravo.
Well put. I mean, and some of it has stuff that they were doing. Some of it was provided for in federal law. But the stuff that really is going to affect people, voters on election day and really make it easy are the next two things. And that's, number one is no reason absentee voting. So prior to Prop 3, we did have absentee voting, which is voting by mail, what I call vote at home. And that was afforded to seniors, people above 65,
right,
if you were disabled, or you could check you're going to be out of your area, not able to get to your polling location.
Right.
So there was never a way to check that stuff. So we had a lot of people who were voting absentee who were maybe volunteering or doing other stuff on election day, right?
Right.
But now they have the no reason absentee voting, so anybody can vote from home. Now that process involves filling out an application. You return that to your local clerk, not your county clerk. That will go to your city or township clerk.
Gotcha.
And then they will put you on the list to get an absentee application. You get that application, and you return that to the clerk, and then they will issue your ballot, usually about 30 days before an election. Now, the thing I like about this is it's going to impact all of us voters because, number one, the more people that vote at home, the less people are standing in line on election day.
Right.
And a lot of us know the frustration of hurrying across town, getting back from work to try and vote,
right,
and then you get a line, and it's frustrating. And we've even heard stories of in Detroit and places around the country where people get disillusioned and they walk away, and those are votes that are walking away. People who wanted to access the democratic process but were denied that opportunity.
Well, here's what that's also going to cut down on. So I used to vote at 221 Elm Street, but now they've changed it to 221 Clark Street. I'm at Elm Street. I've been waiting in this line for an hour. Then they go, oh, no, your voting is over here. You're right. Most of those people, and they've proven this, just go home. Just be like, it wasn't meant for me to vote, so I'm not going to vote. I'm going to go home.
That's right.
So that's even better, because at this point, we kind of encourage people to do the absentee vote. Let's just get it out the way.
Vote at home. That way you don't have to worry about hustling back home after work. You don't have to worry about scheduling it. You don't have to worry about forgetting it. You don't have to fight your way through the poll workers who are passing out the hair combs and fans and fly swatters and stuff, which annoy everybody. But also it also affords you the opportunity to sit with your ballot at your kitchen table and to think about it. And you're not in a hurry. You can sit there. You can do some research if you want. You come down, you realize, I didn't know that we were voting on community college district today. Let me do some research about that, you know, and really put some thought into it, or review literature that you've been sent. Review hopefully your union voter guide, and look at that stuff and have it all there. So hopefully, in theory, it gives people the opportunity to really approach it thoughtfully and give people time to do it.
So you said something in the beginning of this about a no reason absentee vote, because I think that's really that means I don't have to say I'm out of town. I don't have to give a reason. I can just be like, I just want an absentee ballot at this point with Prop 3.
Yep,
correct?
It's now a right that's afforded to any voter in the state. And then another change with this is that previously, if you had registered by mail, you couldn't vote absentee your first time, and this really impacted our college students. Who register for the first time,
right? And
then they go away to college or they go away somewhere else. They weren't allowed to vote absentee, and either they had to come back home or they had to work something else out, and disenfranchise a lot of college students,
right?
Which was the intent of that law. But now college students can vote no reason absentee voting and just request that absentee ballot, have it sent to them, fill it out, and send it back before election.
Man, this is some good stuff here. I mean, you're right, because I can't tell you how many college students that they couldn't do the absentee vote, couldn't make it back here.
That's right.
Because keep in mind, college is so expensive, and everybody don't have the money to send, if your kid is in California, to fly them back here just to vote and then fly them back to class. So that's not doable for everybody. Man, Prop 3 is sounding really, really, and I voted for it, and so let me say that, but I'm really glad I voted for it now. What else do we have with Prop 3?
So, before we leave absentee voting, I want to say this, because I've heard people repeat this, and some reasons why people will be nervous about absentee voting.
Okay.
I heard somebody stand up and make the claim at a recent meeting that absentee ballots don't get counted unless it's close, quote unquote. And I want to dispel the notion that absentee ballots are somehow different than voting at the polls. It's absolutely the exact same thing. They're counted, they're tallied. Every your vote, whether you cast it at the polling location or whether you cast an absentee ballot, it's exactly the same in terms of the impact. Don't let anybody tell you anything differently. And while we're on the subject of dispelling falsehoods, there's also a falsehood out here in Michigan that people who have a felony on their record are not allowed to vote.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that out. Let's talk about that.
This is not a part of Prop 3.
No, not a part of Prop 3. Okay, but let's talk about that, because I've had people ask me, can felons in Michigan vote? So let me ask you, can felons in Michigan vote?
Absolutely. It doesn't matter where you're at, whether it was a recent thing, whether it was a long time in your past, whether you had it expunged, whether you didn't. Once you've served your time, it is behind you. It does not affect your voting. Absolutely. There's this persistent notion that it somehow impacted people's right to vote. That's absolutely not true. Now, I think the reason that it came up is that some other states treat it differently, but here in Michigan, it's absolutely something that it doesn't preclude you from voting. Now, the only person that can't vote, who is otherwise eligible, if you're 18, you're a citizen. The only reason that if you're in trouble with the law and you couldn't vote is if post-conviction incarceration. So if you are serving time for a felony, or if you're in jail after you've been convicted, you can't order an absentee ballot to jail. However,
I didn't even think about. You know what? I didn't even think about that. That is
those are the only people that can't vote. Now listen. Now, if you're in jail awaiting trial, like for example, if you couldn't afford to post bond and you're waiting, you are eligible to vote absentee ballot at that point. But post conviction, you cannot. So that's the only window. But so whether you're awaiting trial on a felony or whether you have been convicted of a felony, served your time, and are out, does not affect your ability to vote. If you're in jail.
Yeah, that's a little different. Okay, no. You made that real clear. So what about this? What about somebody that's on probation? Can they vote?
Absolutely.
Okay. That was my other. When you said that, I thought about probation. And I got probation. Can I vote? That's cool. That's some very, very good information. So
it really is a game changer. And I want to say this because it's a labor podcast, and there might be some labor leaders and labor activists listening. This really changes the way that labor leaders and organizational leaders can get their people involved. Because we're always, people in positions of leadership are always trying to urge membership to vote and how important it is. But this is a way that we can, really help people. You as a labor leader, you can give people that absentee application, have them fill it out. You can't collect it back, but you could have them send it. You can have an envelope there for them to put it in, and they can send it back. You can't collect it, but it's really a way for labor leaders to really ensure that all your people's voices are being heard. And it's really going to change the way that campaigns approach it, the way that I think labor and other organizations, member-based organizations, approach voting. Because once you put in that application, any citizen can go to the Secretary of State's website and track that ballot all the way through the process. So you can know who returned that application. You can tell when the clerk issued the ballot. You can tell if the person has returned the ballot. That's all available information. So it's a way for labor leaders, organizational leaders, or community activists to really make sure and hold people accountable if they're voting.
You know what? We did a ratification vote for one of our units inside the local, and it happened to be around Christmas time, and it had to be back by the end of that week. And I was on vacation, and it was a nightmare because I would have to go all throughout Michigan to get these ballots. And we were able to do an electronic ballot. And I ended up getting it set up. It took me probably about 4 or 5 hours to get everybody in, set up, registered, and then what they could do is go on their phones and electronically vote. What I liked about that system, and I'm not suggesting that we go to that. That's not where I'm going with this. What I liked about it was I could go into the report, and it would tell me, hey, did Fred go in and look at the ballot? Fred looked at the ballot, but he didn't make a decision. Okay, cool. It never told me if you voted, how you voted. It just showed that you accessed the ballot. So let's just say somebody came through and said, I didn't get the email, I wasn't able to vote. I could literally go into the system, look at it, and be like, well, if you wasn't able to vote, how come you went in and looked at the ballot?
Somebody's got your phone, they're looking at your ballot
on
your phone.
Or with your password, right. It was a whole lot going on there.
My point is you can call people out. Yeah.
And that's what's cool about this is the fact that you can track it, which is really good because I don't remember us being able to do that before. And then secondly, going back to the absentee ballot, I can actually see my wife doing this. And let me ask you, is this going to be legal? So this is a question for you now. I can see.
Now, I don't want to get into any marriage advice here.
No. But I can see because my wife is a outgoing. She's a very, very kind and personable person, right? And she loves to get people together to talk and really get into some issues. Would it be legal for my wife to have a ballot party where everybody bring their absentee ballots and we all sit at a table and we have conversation? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that I'm watching how you're checking your ballot, but at the end of the day, everybody has to take their own ballot to the ballot box. But can we all sit at a party and just talk about what's going on with the ballot and argue back and forth and then later on make our decision? Is that legal?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. A couple of precautions. You don't ever want to get into the position where you're handling somebody else's ballot.
Right.
And to return an absentee ballot, it has to be either the voter has to return it in person by themselves, drop it in U.S. mail. There is a provision if for an elderly person or disabled person or someone else, a family member can do it, and you have to sign that special. But activists and candidates and whoever never want to get in the business of ballots or absentee ballot applications. That's why you want to provide them the absentee ballot application, but make sure that they send it back on their own.
Got you.
It's different with voter registration. When you're registering voters, you can return those as a help, but absentee ballot separately.
Okay, that was a good point. That's a really, really good point.
I think the ballot party is a great idea, and anytime we can get people talking about what's going on, these issues. I mean, that's where the rubber meets the road, and we're at such a critical juncture in this country that sometimes I feel like we're more connected than ever, but yet we're more separated than ever, right?
Yeah, my brother.
We can pull our car into our garage, put down the garage, go into our home. We got climate controlled. We never have to go outside. And we can get the entertainment that we want. We can order in food, and we never have to talk to anybody if we don't want to, right?
Well, you know what? I had a class many moons ago, and the one guy said the death of the community was the electric garage door opener. He said because what happened was even back then in the 50s where the garages were attached to the house, he said that wasn't the killer. Because Mr. Johnson would get out his car. Hey, Joe, how you doing today? As he's opening his garage door. Now people had their music going, windows up, air on, hit the button. In fact, as they're bending the corner to get into their driveway, they're hitting that button and moving into that garage, and that door is coming down before they cut the car off. So that means you have no interaction with your neighbor. And then you also brought up something else that would actually build on to this. We got Grubhub and Uber Eats and all that stuff. So now you don't even have to go to the restaurants and order your food. You just go on your phone, put it in, and the food arrives at your door. And you're right, you never have interaction. And I think that is one of the problems that we have in our society.
It's deceptive that we're more connected than we've ever been before, but in some ways we're more separated than we are.
We are separated.
So
I agree.
Forcing these conversations, which is what unions do. Unions are about having conversations with your workers, with your colleagues, with your elected leaders. That's one of the reasons I love the union movement, is because it facilitates those conversations, and that's what good community activists do. It's what good politicians do, good organizers do. It's facilitating those conversations, which is what you're doing right here, having a good conversation.
And I'm having a conversation with Fred Miller, the Macomb clerk. Man, it's good to have you. Good to have you. What else do we have going on with Prop 3?
One last really important thing about Prop 3 is has to do with same-day voter registration.
Oh.
So before this is a big one. This
is a big one.
So
okay, all ears.
Before Prop 3, 30 days out, if you weren't registered to vote, you had to sit this one out.
Right.
So now, up to and including Election Day, you can register to vote and vote, which is exciting because when you think about most people who aren't union activists, who aren't political people, they don't start focusing on these elections until inside the last couple of weeks.
Right.
So previously, if they weren't registered to vote or they had moved a long way and they couldn't get an absentee ballot or whatever, they couldn't vote. But now you can actually register to vote up to and including Election Day. A couple of things about this.
Okay.
The 2-week window, 14 days out from an election.
Okay.
Up until then, you can just fill out an application that you can get from my website, from the Secretary of State's website. Fill it out.
And what is your website?
It is macombgov.org/clerk.
Okay. Say that one more time for us.
Macombgov, macombgov.org/clerk. And you can go on there. You can download voter registration applications, absentee applications, all that stuff.
Cool.
You can download the application, send it in up until 2 weeks out. Inside that 2-week window, you can still register to vote, but you have to do it in person because that way they have to verify who it is. Again, another protection to make sure that we have fair elections, that we don't have people who aren't supposed to be voting. So you go to your local city or township clerk, you present your ID, you present the application, and then you're registered to vote. So let's say you haven't done that, and today's election day, you can still do it. You can go to your clerk's office and you register to vote. Now, you can't do it at the polls. You can't show up at your poll or at any polling location to register to vote. It has to be at the city or township clerk's office. So city hall, basically, township office.
So that's where you would be casting your vote. You would show your ID, fill the application out, show the ID, and then they will give you a ballot, and you'll fill it out and give it right back to them.
You'd have your choice depending on what time it was in the day that you could go out and vote in your neighborhood polling location if you wanted to. But
it is a choice. The
easiest way would be if you registered that on election day, they could issue you an absentee ballot. You could vote it right there and give it back.
Give it right back to them.
Yep.
What kind of ID do they need to give?
You need a driver's license or a state issued ID. However, if you don't have that, if you can show multiple other third-party validators of your residency, utility bill, other things that have your name and address on that, they would accept that as proof of residency. But again, you have to do that in person with the clerk. Now, I know I said that was the one last thing.
No, you're good. You're good. Oh, can you use a passport?
Passport is an acceptable. It can be a current utility bill, a bank statement, a paycheck, a government check, or other government document, which would include a passport. Yes.
Okay, great.
Although a passport don't always have your address on it.
No, it doesn't have your address on it.
But that could be one of the other ones if you had a passport in conjunction with
a utility bill,
exactly,
DTE bill, or Consumers Energy, or whoever your energy provider would be. Yep. But you were saying one more thing.
So we're coming up on the presidential election, and we always hear the news folk talk about early voting in other states. And we've never had early voting in Michigan until Prop 3. Prop 3 says that every single local clerk in the state of Michigan has to be open a minimum of 8 hours on the weekend before an election. So here in Macomb, we had a primary election this week, and so there were in 3 different communities. They chose to be open on the 8 hours on the Saturday before. And a lot of clerks, I think, will do that. So now, for the very first time, we're going to be able to, if you can't vote in person on Election Day, if you don't want to do absentee voting or vote at home for whatever reason, you can go to your clerk's office on the day that they're open on the weekend before and vote then. So it's really going to be, again, for community organizers, for union activists, for other people who are trying to mobilize voters.
Right.
Huge opportunity to get people to the polls in a way that's easy and accessible for working people.
Man, you know what? I tell you what, you are making me feel so good about Prop 3. It seemed like we were in the dark ages prior to Prop 3.
It's a landmark change in our voting rights. But again, I want to say this, that just because we change the law doesn't necessarily we change reality, right? We have to implement it. And we all have, everybody who's got a platform has an obligation. If you care about this stuff, if you care about empowering voters and people, and if you believe in voting as an avenue for change, which I wholeheartedly do, it's a learned behavior. Voting is learned behavior.
Right.
We have an obligation to take this forward to anybody who's in our sphere of influence and tell them about how they can vote at home, or how they could do early voting, or how they can do late voter registration, all these things. Because we know that people are busy. People have all kinds of information coming at them. They don't think about this stuff. And so they have to be told. And once they do it a couple times, then it'll become a habit. And we're going to have a whole avalanche of people who are going to be out there voting and hopefully change the structures of power in this country.
Wow. I mean, and this shows how powerful voting is, because a lot of people always, my vote don't count. I love hearing that, or loathe hearing that. My vote don't count, and your vote does count.
As they say, bad officials are only elected by good citizens who don't vote. So every time, and they always capture the people who are going to jail for doing something or not doing something right, not doing something the way that they should. But those people were put in office by the people who don't vote.
Fred, I got one more thing for you, because it looks like we've covered Prop 3 very, very well. And I got two things for you. So when do you think Prop 3 will fully be enforced? Is it a year from now, maybe 2 years from now? Should everything in Prop 3 be enforced maybe 2, 3, 4 years from now? How long will it take to get everything where Prop 3 is running like it's supposed to?
I would say that it's mostly running right now. We have this year we have 3 election dates. We had one in May, which are usually for low turnout with smaller elections, always. School elections and stuff.
Right.
August, that just passed, we had cities had primary elections. Some cities had primary elections. Mm-hmm. And then in November, we're going to have a little bit larger. It's going to be general elections in cities. But next year, we have a presidential primary in March, which is going to get a lot of attention. We'll have another May election, and then we're going to have our big August primary in 2020, and then the main event, which will be headlined by our presidential, U.S. Senate election, all that, and county clerks are up then too, just for the voters to know that. But it's being implemented. We've had people even starting in the low turnout election in May here in Macomb, and I know it's the same for all the counties across the state. We had election day election day voters registering even in May. So
wow.
The rights of Prop 3 they're slowly seeping out there, and again, I apologize for sounding like a broken record, but this is a learned behavior. People don't even know about this stuff.
No, you're right. You're right.
The more we tell people, the more we talk about it, the people will implement it. Some of the processes, like we talked about, the same-day voter, or rather the automatic voter registration of the Secretary of State, that will be online quickly.
Great.
But it's still working. But the majority of these rights are available for us to access right now.
Wow, that is pretty cool. Now, one last thing for you. Dude, your watch that you're wearing, is that a Shinola?
Shinola. It was a Father's Day gift from my family. Oh, you got a good one here. Let's see.
Yeah, I got one too, man. Detroit, and it goes right back into by Michigan, but you were saying about your Shinola.
This is a Detroit Tigers version, blue and orange, and then it's got the baseball mitt. It's a hard time to be a Tigers fan, but I love my Tigers, so... So I'm lucky. My great daughters and my wife got that for me.
Hey, well, give shouts out to them, man.
And that's a sharp one right there. That's nice.
Yeah,
that's
my
nice.
my wife she's a big Michigan. Well, my wife is a Detroit Lions fan.
Oh, condolences.
When she hears this podcast, she gonna be like Fred Flintstone with the fire shooting out of her ears, because she is, dude. My wife is a huge Lions fan.
All right.
So hey, Lions, any of the Lions listening, my wife wants you to go to the Super Bowl in her lifetime.
All right. I'm not holding my breath, but I will give a shout out. We have one of our team members here in the clerk's office. Her daughter is part of the Lions dance team this year. Just signed on. So
wow, what's her name?
I don't know the daughter's name, but her last name is Maniachi.
Okay, all right. Well, shouts out to you. I'm not going to even try to mispronounce that one, because I'll be messed it up. Well, look, man, Fred, thank you for coming on to the show. I believe that this is one of the most informational podcasts we have done to date, because you have really drawn out Prop 3 where it needed to be. And again, everybody, this podcast is called LaborVision. It is one word, and you can look it up on iTunes. You put it in LaborVision and it'll pop up. Spotify, LaborVision, it'll pop up. We're working on iHeart. iHeart Radio. We're still waiting for our stuff to come back from them, but we're hoping it's going to come back and it'll be good. And if you just do a search in Google, LaborVision. We also have what is it called? American Workers First. And that is AmericanWorkersFirst.org. And that is a website that we talk about American workers being first. And it also has a YouTube connected to that. And then we also have Union Members Radio, which is on Sunday nights at 7 o'clock on the Patriot channel. But whatever you do, we're asking everybody to follow, subscribe, do all that above, so we can make this podcast the great podcast that it is. And when we have somebody like Mr. Fred Miller here, his word can get out and you can be well educated. Fred, can we get you to come back to do another podcast later on for something different?
I'm at your service.
All right. Thank you, my brother. Well, here we go. This is it. We are getting ready to close this show out. Fred, thank you for your time and your effort. And hey, thank you out there for listening, and have a great one. Talk to you soon. Bye.